wrote the letter of Philippians somewhere around 60 to 63 AD, probably about a dozen years after he had planted the church. Philippi, the city where the church was located, was a Roman colony. It was already a city. Philippi was already a city named for a Greek king, but it became a Roman colony after a great battle that happened right there between Octavian and Antony on one side and Brutus and Cassius on the other side, somewhere around 41 BC. And after that battle, there were all these soldiers who had to be paid. The pension plan in the Roman Empire was that you'd get some property after your service. And so all the area around Philippi was kind of taken over for these Roman soldiers. And Philippi became a Roman military city. A lot of the people who lived there had Roman background. They saw themselves as Roman. And the city was given some privileges that most other foreign cities were not given. It was as if it were in Italy. They didn't charge them tribute. They didn't have to pay the special taxes. And a lot of the people were seen as part of the real Roman empire, as if they were right there beside the city. When Paul goes into the city, somewhere in the mid-40s, when he goes into the city of Philippi, it says the first person he meets is a God-fearer named Lydia. And she's a person who sells purple cloth. And we don't know a lot about Lydia, but again, there's some clues. So she's a God-fearer. That means that she was a Gentile, but she had begun to study the Jewish scriptures. She had begun to study what we would look at as the Old Testament to try to see what she could understand about God. And she was a salesperson, and she sold purple cloth, and she had enough space in her house to house Paul and his entourage when he came into the city. So she probably had some money. And it certainly wasn't a woman's world back then, and she had made something of herself pretty powerful and pretty wealthy in the area of fashion. And that's the first person that Paul gets to know there. And probably the church in Philippi, when it first started, met in her house. When Paul is going through the city of Philippi, it talks about this in Acts chapter 16, when he's going through the city of Philippi, it says that he runs across a slave girl. And she's demon-possessed, and she's making all these wild prophecies, and it attracts a lot of people to want to see her, and her owners, her masters, make quite a bit of money out of her. And she calls out to Paul and tells people who are listening that Paul knows the way to be saved. And she does this all week long. And finally, after several days, Paul says enough, and he casts the demon out of her, and she's healed. And I don't know what it would feel like to be possessed. I mean, a lot of my information on that, probably like yours, comes from movies like The Exorcist and not from any solid biblical teaching. But I would imagine it was a lot like being crazy. And so he gave this girl her mind back. And he gave this girl her future back because her masters, her owners, didn't want her anymore after she couldn't make them money like that. And it made the owners angry. And so they had Paul and Silas thrown into prison. While they were there was a jailer who was told to watch them pretty careful. And this jailer probably was a veteran, probably had been a Roman soldier, probably had in his, after being a soldier, had settled into being a jailer there, a sheriff, local sheriff kind of operation. And so he's watching Paul and Silas, has them all locked up tight in the very most inner room, and they're in stocks. But God sends an earthquake, and it breaks open all the locks. And when the jailer comes and sees that all the doors are open, he pulls his sword out. He's going to kill himself, do the honorable thing. And Paul calls out to him, don't hurt yourself. We're all still here. And he's broken by this. What do I need to do to be saved? And these are the first three people in the church. You've got Lydia, the rich fashionista. You've got the slave girl who had been known all over town as a crazy prophet. And then you've got this veteran, Roman soldier veteran who's a jailer now, and this is the beginning. And they have nothing in common, these three people, except for Jesus. And that's how church always is. The thing that ties us together is who we hold as Lord. And out of that church became, I think, one of Paul's favorite churches. When you look at the different people he wrote letters to, most of the letters can kind of take a negative tone here and there. And Philippians really doesn't do that. Philippians stays pretty positive the whole time. I think he really, really, really enjoyed this church, and he really, really enjoyed these people. I think they had a special place in his heart. Very beginning, the very first verse that we want to focus on is chapter 1, verse 3. Paul says, I thank God every time I remember you. And that's kind of a cool verse. You could send letters to people and put Philippians 3 there at the bottom and have people look that up, and they'd read that. I thank God every time and if they did read that, think how they'd feel. And wouldn't that be an awesome thing to say to somebody? And Paul, I think, is trying to encourage him. But I think at some level it's true too. Every time I think about you guys, I feel better, he says. Every time I think about you, I'm reminded of all the good stuff you're doing. And I give God thanks for it. And then he says, and in all my prayers for you. You know, I always pray with joy. He says, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day till now. He said, it always brightens me up to think about it because we're in this together, right? I mean, when I think about all the different things you've done to serve, and I think about all the different things, the ways you've come in there and helped out and blessed me, and the partnership. It's a Greek word, koinonia. It's like a fellowship, but it's a lot of sharing. You know, we're all in this together. Paul says, when I think about how you've been there for me, I can't help but feel better. And he says, I'm confident, and this is kind of something I wanted to focus on here, this last part. So I'm confident that he who began a good work in you will carry it to completion till the day of Christ Jesus. So he began a good work. That's when you become a Christian. That's when the journey starts, and you go out from there and you live your life. Here's the moment when it all took off, and then you live your life. As you're growing and as you move on in Jesus, hopefully you're learning a few things, and hopefully you're getting stronger, and hopefully you're figuring some stuff out. Hopefully you're making some adjustments in your life. And Christ, God, who began that good work, who gave you salvation, he's moving you someplace. He's taking you someplace. He's got a plan for you. And Paul says, this is how I pray for you. Whenever I pray, it's how I pray. So he says, and this is my prayer. And then he gets specific about what he's praying. I pray that your love might abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you might be able to discern what's best, be pure and blameless till the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the praise, glory and praise of God. There's just two or three things here I want to focus on, and maybe something for you to think about. When you're praying for other people, when you're praying for somebody, if I'm being honest, and I bet this is true for you, when you pray for people, you pray for their physical health. You know, my friend is sick, or my friend has a doctor's appointment, or you pray for their relationships. You know, she's in a hard marriage right now, God, or he's having so much trouble with his boss or his kids, and you pray about those things. But Paul, he says, my prayer is all about the spiritual stuff. And I think maybe we don't give enough credit to that. We don't think hard enough about what that means and what we're supposed to do there. So when you think about the people you love, like Paul, the people that you thank God for every time you think about them, what kinds of prayers should you make? Well, here's some tips. So I pray, first of all, that you love better, that it's easier for you to open your heart, that it's easier for you to imagine possibilities with people, that you kind of become a sort of person who forgives easily, who smiles fast. I pray that you be the kind of person who's always willing to lend to somebody who needs it. I pray that your door's always open, that you don't ever get hurt or burned. I pray that your love just abounds more and more. And the more that you understand who Jesus is, and the more that you figure that out, I just pray that you get it more and more and more. And there should be a tie between these two things in love. I mean, there should be a tie between those things. The deeper I get with Jesus, the more loving I should be. Now, that's not always true in church. Sometimes people get smart about Jesus and become more judgmental or mean. But that's not what's supposed to happen. And when you're praying for the people you love, you want to pray this way. God, help them love more and more and more. He said, I want you to be able to discern what's best, to know the best way to help others and the best way to live your life. I want you to be able to know what God's will is, to be able to figure it out. I just pray that when you look out at the world, you see it the same way God does. And these are great things to pray for one another. And he says, I pray that you'll be pure and blameless for the day of Christ. Now, of course, he's not imagining that they'll be perfect, because there's nobody perfect. But you're tied into Jesus. Your heart's tied into his heart. And the blood that he shed on the cross is doing its good work to forgive you, and you're giving your very best to him. And as you get deeper, remember, he's carrying you on to completion, right? As you get deeper and deeper and deeper with him, that one day you're going to stand up with great confidence in front of Jesus. Not because of how good you are, but because of your relationship with him. You just won't ever let go of him. You just won't ever quit on him. This is the prayer that any one of us should make. So I want to challenge you here at the end of our short lesson. As you think about the people who mean the very most to you, how do you pray for them? You know, if God is going to carry it on to completion, and he absolutely is, why pray stuff like this? Well, I think a couple reasons. When I pray like this for other people, it re-clarifies to me what's most important, right? But then there's also this sense, and this is kind of the mystery as it regards prayer altogether. There's this sense that God allows us to push the issue, that life was going to go a certain direction if we did nothing. But when we come in and we pray, when we come in and we ask God to move, that he very generously does move based on what we asked. And that if we didn't take that initiative to ask, well, God would still do what God will do, but there would be blessings missed. And when you think about the people that you love the very most, the ones that you thank God for every time you remember them, this is kind of where we want to be. You know, I hope that they stay physically healthy, and I hope they have great relationships. But the thing I hope the most is that they're open-hearted, that this world is a joy for them and not a burden, that they see Jesus in everything, and that they're able to speak quite confidently about this Lord that saved them, and that one day they'll be able to stand before him pure and blameless, unashamed, because of a lifetime of walking with him. I'm praying that for you. I'll pray about that as soon as we turn the camera off. And I hope you pray that for me and pray that for the ones that you love.